Is climate change natural or is it caused by humans? Well, depending on which corner of the internet you waste your time on, you may have heard very different answers to that question.
I think most people are open to the idea that the climate is changing. It has always changed, by the way, as you know.
Do you believe in climate change?
No.
Why not?
Bull.
What do you mean, Elvis?
Climate goes up and down for centuries and millennia. There's no such thing as climate change.
Our climate is always changing. And what they have chosen to do is take a handful of decades of research.
But it's always been up and down. Like I had this guy, Steve Koonin, on the podcast, who's a physicist, and he wasn't even a climate scientist.
So which one is it? Well, I'm going to try and answer that in this video, but I am going to do more than that because Google could probably do that for you. I'm going to explain the science behind what we know. And to do that, I am going to use this ruler to help contextualize the really, really long time frames that we talk about when we talk about natural climate change. More importantly, however, if you stick around to the very end, I will explain why knowing that the world has gone through natural changes in the past is itself further proof that humans are causing the current warming that we're seeing. So stick around for that, or skip ahead. I'll probably have a chapter called Human-Caused Climate Change. Just know that if you do skip ahead, I will know, and I will think less of you. But with that covered, my name is Matthew. These two pieces of paper are framed so I can feel more important, and you're watching Carbon Anonymous. Time for school. So to understand why the warming we're seeing right now is so distinctly unnatural, i.e. caused by humans, we need to explain what natural climate change looks like in the first place. And that is very hard to do because the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, which is, and you can fact check me on this, too many candles for a birthday cake. And in that very long time frame, the Earth has of course gone through some pretty big changes. It's gone through a hot girl phase, it's gone through a too cool for school phase, and it's even gone through some pretty bad breakups. By the way, I am way more proud of that joke than I should be. Going from these different phases has ultimately meant that the Earth and its climate has also gone through some pretty big natural changes. That is, if your definition of natural is that humans haven't caused it, because humans, or Homo sapiens, are relatively new to this whole Earth thing. And we've only really been around for like 300,000 years. And while we all know that 300,000 and 4.5 billion are two very different numbers, how big those differences are, I think is lost on us because we don't have any frame of reference, which is where this ruler comes in. So we're gonna fit all 4.5 billion years of Earth's history on the length of this ruler. And I hope that by doing that, we can explore what we mean by natural climate change, and then that can segue well into why the warming that we're seeing right now is so distinctly unnatural. This ruler, by the way, cost me much more money than I was expecting and has massively blown out the budget for my videos. So if you want to make me feel better about this purchase, make sure to like and subscribe. But without further ado, let's debunk climate change misinformation by wrecking this ruler. All right, so let's start by establishing our scale. This whole stick is going to represent the entire 4.5 billion years of Earth's history. Therefore, every inch is going to represent roughly 125 million years. So starting from the beginning, we have a pretty boring start. For the first 700 million years, the Earth was just a rock in space. No life, just a lot of asteroids and lava. At 3.8 billion years ago, did life finally form on this planet. But it was single-celled organisms that were so simple they could barely even be called bacteria. Even then, it took these single-celled organisms 300 million years to finally develop photosynthesis. These single-celled organisms then spent the next 1.2 billion years converting Earth's carbon dioxide atmosphere into the one we know today, full of oxygen. Another 800 million years passes before we finally get multicellular organisms and not just single-celled bacteria. Now, sometime during this time frame, the Earth likely turned into a snowball, which eventually thawed into the Cambrian explosion, which was when we really started to see some cool biodiversity on this planet. We only have 4 inches left and we haven't even got to the dinosaurs yet. And those dinosaurs won't show up until roughly 250 million years ago. Those dinosaurs stuck around until 60 million years ago when the asteroid caused their mass extinction. And just some food for thought, while the asteroid definitely killed the dinosaurs within the direct blast zone, it didn't kill all of them. What likely killed the rest of the dinosaurs was the subsequent abrupt change in the Earth's climate, something similar to like a nuclear winter. A change that happened so fast, most species couldn't adapt. And for those of you who aren't picking up what I'm putting down, this is what is called foreshadowing. Look how little time we have left, and humans haven't even showed up yet. I mean, mammals are finally starting to take over, but humans won't show up until 300,000 years ago, which even on this massive meter-long ruler is a time frame that is so small, it's thinner than most people's hair. So why am I showing you this? Well, first off, I think it's pretty cool, but don't give me credit. It was something that was showed to me back when I was in university. More importantly, I'm showing you this to kind of explain the massive timescales that we talk about with natural climate change. It usually takes thousands, if not millions of years for meaningful climate change to occur. Well, other than the dinosaurs, that was pretty abrupt. And although you'll hear climate skeptics often talk about how it used to be much warmer or much colder on Earth, which is certainly true, that almost misses the point on why climate change is so problematic, right? The dinosaurs were very well adapted to the hot, balmy climate that they existed within, until they weren't, and that was a problem. Humans and the other species that currently call Earth home are very well adapted to our current climate. And as that changes as well, that is also going to be quite bad for us. So there are 2 conclusions that I want you to take away from this video so far. First, natural climate change takes a really, really long time to happen. And the fact that we're seeing such rapid warming is already a really good indication that what we're experiencing shouldn't be considered natural. Secondly, the speed of climate change is often what determines whether it's a problem or not. If climate change takes thousands, if not tens of thousands of years to occur, that's not necessarily a problem, as most species can adapt over time. If instead climate change is occurring, within decade-long timescales, which is what we're currently seeing, that's more problematic because we don't have the time to adapt. So we've established that the speed of climate change is what makes it a problem, and is also a really good indication that what we're seeing is distinctly unnatural, which already kind of debunks this piece of misinformation. However, if there is a nail in the coffin, it is also the direction of that change which is interesting, because at least right now, the fact that the world is warming is also pretty unnatural. Alright, I've tried my best to shield you from graphs throughout this entire video because I know how boring they can get, but I am a climate scientist, so it is in my blood to be using graphs to show my point. However, I am going to show you graphs, but I am going to make you do some pattern recognition to at least make it just a little bit more engaging. So like I said before, humans have only really been around for 300,000 years, which means that looking back multiple 100 million years ago is pretty irrelevant. So we're going to zoom in. We're going to zoom in specifically to the last million years or so, which works out really well because that's what we have the best data for. This graph shows the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last 800,000 years. This data, by the way, was pulled from ice cores, which are a really cool aspect of climate science, and I highly suggest checking them out. As we can see in this graph, there is some sort of trend to the data. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, roughly every 100,000 years or so, which actually coincides with glacial and interglacial periods. If you want to learn more about those kind of periods, by the way, I suggest you check out the movie Ice Age, which actually gets it correct in that humans aren't causing climate change, nor is it anything natural. It's just some squirrel trying to get his acorn. Anyways, here's my question to you. I removed the last 200 years from this graph. Based on the pattern that you see, right, this up and down, what is the natural progression that we should see? Should it A, go down? Should it B, stay the same? Or should it C, go upwards? Go ahead, I'll give you 5 seconds. Wrong. Try directly upwards, because that's what this graph looks like when you add just the short 200-year time frame that humans have been burning fossil fuels. Are you going to look at this graph and say, yeah, that looks natural? Of course not. But that's just carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. What about temperature? After all, we are talking about climate change. Well, let's zoom in again to the most relevant time period for us as humans, which is the last 10,000 years, because that's where most of human history exists within, a period known as the Holocene. So again, I've removed the last 200 years from this graph. However, if you've been paying attention at all, you can probably guess what's going to happen next. As you can see in this graph, temperatures kind of go up, they peak, and they start going down. This is of course natural, right? If we take the last graph as an indication, right, the world goes up and down and up and down. So we're currently at an up. So it makes sense that the world should start a slow, and emphasis on the slow here, cooling to return to a glacial period. Of course, we aren't going to do that because when I add the last 200 years, we can see the temperatures spike quite a bit. It's even worse than that because this graph is out of date. If I add the most recent temperatures from 2024, it looks something more like this. So that's what I meant with changing the direction. The natural progression we should see is a very slow cooling of the planet. But of course, we're not seeing that. It is now rapidly warming, which is distinctly unnatural. And this is why scientists like Katherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist based out of Texas, have argued that that makes humans responsible for more than 100% of the warming that we're seeing. But how does that make sense? How can you be responsible for more than 100%? Well, the argument goes that not only are humans warming the planet, we're also counteracting the natural cooling that we should be seeing. Therefore, humans are responsible for more than 100% of the warming. Really puts the whole climate change is natural thing into perspective, doesn't it? So to conclude this video, is climate change natural or is it caused by humans? Well, the answer is both. And it depends on what the implication is of what you're saying. If you're saying that climate change is natural because it's happened in the past, that is certainly true. And we kind of reviewed that, how the world most certainly does go through natural changes in its climate. However, I find that the implication has always been that because climate change is natural, humans can't be responsible. And that is demonstrably false. As we've seen throughout this video, the warming that we're seeing is very quick, and that's not very natural. In addition, it's also warming. And as we've seen with the trends over the last million years, we shouldn't be seeing warming. We should naturally be seeing cooling. Both those factors are very unnatural and are huge pieces of evidence as to why humans are causing what we're seeing. Which is why I said at the start of this video that knowing that the Earth has gone through natural changes in the past is actually itself further proof that humans are responsible for what we're currently seeing. Alright, so what's the call to action here? Well, in my last video, that you can click here by the way, I talked about how the worst misinformation usually has at least a little bit of truth in it, or at least enough to trick the average person into believing in it. However, this one's a little bit more frustrating because it removes context. And that sucks because context absolutely matters. So throughout this video, I tried my best to give you the context you need to fully assess that question. So to help fight misinformation in the future, really have a sit down with yourself and say, hey, am I being painted the whole picture? Or is there stuff being left out, right? That goes a very long way from avoiding these admittedly tricky pieces of misinformation. That, of course, applies to me as well. If you think I've left something out of this conversation or want me to elaborate further, put it in the comments section below. I will say though, I have definitely left tons of evidence out of this video for the sake of time. There is mountains of evidence showing that humans are causing climate change, whether it be stratospheric cooling, carbon isotopes, infrared spectrometry, like the list goes on. However, those are going to be for another time. So if you want to learn more about those, make sure to subscribe. With that being said, my name is Matthew. You've been watching Carbon Anonymous, and thank you for watching.